Hey, gang, just a brief intro into Music Weeks. Here they are now. I was also considering going down the list of all the people that you see over the Music Weeks to be part of each episode, let you know who's coming or who may have been or whatnot. The list has grown. Too big to really go into here. I don't want to take that much time. Music Weeks, thankfully, has grown into a pretty big deal. So it's grown a lot more than just the one music week it originally was going to start out as into multiple weeks now. So at any rate, rather than ramble more, let's go ahead and get into this particular day's Music Weeks episodes, and I'm trying to drop them Monday through Friday each week of Music Weeks. Thank you all for tuning in. Take care. God bless. As Graham Norton would say, let's get some guests on.
Welcome to Constitutionalist Politics Podcast, aka CTP. I am your host, Joseph M. Leonard, and that's Lenard. CTP is your no muss, no fuss, just me, you, and an occasional guest type podcast. Really appreciate you tuning in. As Graham Norton would say, let's get on with the show!
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Constitutionalist Politics Podcast. Joining me today is Marcus Manderson. How are you today, Marcus?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on this podcast.
Before we get into the why you're here kind of thing, I like to joke, like, Masked Singer does it too, right? Cue the Who song. Who are you, right? Where were you born? Where were you raised? Where are you now? Those kind of fun things.
Yeah. Quick spiel. Born in Virginia, live in Virginia, Northern Virginia, close to DC. But my mom was in the military, so we were stationed in Germany for a while, and came back to Virginia. My mom retired here. So my dad's Jamaican, so we would travel to Jamaica to visit his family often growing up. So we were always traveling.
Okay, gotta do the obligatory. Yeah. My audience knows I can't pass on the lame punt. Jamaican me crazy, man.
Jamaican me crazy, man. So my dad, he's probably been in this country for, 20, 30 years, and it still sounds like the accent is strong as ever. And then pretty much settled in Virginia mid-90s and spent the rest of life growing up in Virginia, and went to school, started studying music. I played piano in church, a Hammond organ artist, so played Hammond and piano in church for almost 30 years, leading up until the pandemic. And then went to school, got music degrees, have a wife and kids, 2 teenage kids. One is in college. So, started life early because of our conviction. We got married. I was 19 when we got married, and we'll be celebrating 21 years in 2 weeks from the time of the recording of this. So, life is lifing. Our daughter is in college. Our son is a junior in high school. So, life is
your daughter's fast. In college, where they're trying to overturn everything you ever taught her.
Yeah, that's a different podcast, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, actually, I will say not at the college she's at, because she's at Spelman College, which is the #1 HBCU in the country, in Georgia. So a little bit different level of experience there, but just enjoying that heritage that she's becoming a part of.
Yeah, my favorite college, and not just because it's basically a stone's throw from me a few counties over, is Hillsdale College, who still to this day don't take a penny of government money, so they have complete autonomy. I really like that about them. Yeah. But again, as you said, a whole other podcast. And, I've German, Italian, and Polish heritage. So you said you were deployed with them there
Yeah. Yeah, we
for
were
a
in
while.
Stuttgart and Bremerhaven.
Did you pick up any German?
When I was younger, Spreche Sie Deutsch, but a lot of it I was, I don't know, 7. So this was forever ago. So a lot of it I have forgotten, and because we were on military base, so it was like American base
Right,
in Germany.
exactly. Immigrant parents, great grandparents escaped Poland and Germany during World War One and in Italy, uh, and they were of the immigrant melting pot mindset. This is America. You become American. You
Yeah.
blend. You speak English here. So, unfortunately, I didn't have the benefit of them teaching me all those other languages. I wish I knew now today. I did try to learn German for a while, but indeed, I didn't really have anybody to speak it with. So I remember Zupa for soup and, a few things. But that's about it. And again, anyway, we are already way off the beaten path.
That's fine. That's life.
But yeah, that's what I like about bringing people on. As I was saying in the green room, my style is I bring people on and I don't want to know a whole lot about you before I bring you on, just enough to know that you'll be an interesting guest and we'll talk about this or that. But then we go down whatever rabbit holes open and I discover you just as the audience will for the first time when they hear the episode. But indeed, you're here regarding your musical background. And when I read about you, saw about the played piano and organ for 25 plus years, gospel and those sorts of things. But the other part of your background, what immediately came to my mind was Barry Manilow. You remember, right?
Yep.
He wrote traditional music, and we'll get into it. He wrote jingles, too. A lot of people don't know that about him. A lot of the TV ad jingles in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, he wrote them.
Yeah.
So you dabble. Well, we may as well go there now that I started that. Aside from your regular traditional music, I see that, and I underlined it because I thought it interesting. Some of your credits are Disney, Stars, Fox, National Geographic, Smithsonian was one that stood out to me, Amazon Prime Video, Google Play was another one that stood out to me, and Tubi. Like Smithsonian and Google Play, I'm like, what in the world would you be doing for them?
Yeah. We can talk, but just really quick on the Barry Manilow. Yeah, a lot of people don't know. He's done jingles for
Dr. Pepper was one.
Yeah, KFC, Stridex, but his most famous is probably, which a lot of people don't know. You probably know. Do you know his most famous jingle?
I probably did at one time, but I'm drawing a blank.
Like a Good Neighbor.
Oh, no, I didn't know that one. I didn't know that one.
He did the State Farm jingle. But yeah, so doing and now, I mean, there used to be a lot of, with major artists, a lot of negativity towards doing music for like brands, and that sort of flipped. I don't know if it's
sell out.
You're selling out your artistry, and now it's like, you think about it, some of these deals, you get paid 6-7 figures to do a custom jingle or ad for a company or campaign. It's like, I wouldn't scoff at that. So yeah, I started focusing when the pandemic hit. The church went virtual, and it was might not be a great take for your audience, but for me, being a musician in church, I didn't realize until the pandemic how much time it was taken away from my family. So it wasn't until the pandemic where it was like, in the church, I had 3-4 hour rehearsals 2-3 days a week, and then out all day Sunday with services. So it wasn't until the pandemic hit that I was able to spend all of Mother's Day and all of Father's Day at home with my wife and kids. And you know, we were able to take vacations that didn't have to be between Sunday and Sunday, because we would leave Sunday after church, and then we'd have to be back before, you know, the next Sunday service, because I played every Sunday basically. So it wasn't until the pandemic hit that we took a 2-week vacation, and I was like, "What is this? I'm not used to this." Like,
Where did you get to go during the pandemic and virtually everything was locked down?
my wife's a travel agent, and we book things sometimes, you know, 2 years, a year in advance. So we had things booked. I believe it was December of 2020, and we didn't know if it was going to be canceled. But luckily, we had to wear masks and everything. But it was I think it was a 2-week like Disney vacation to Florida. It was like we spent a couple of days at the parks, and then we did a Disney cruise, and it ended up being like 2 weeks total across. So, yeah, so we had things already planned before the pandemic, and actually we went to Vegas a couple times during the pandemic. Vegas didn't seem like they shut down at all. We don't gamble or anything, but we went to a couple of concerts out there and took the family and did a couple shows, Cirque du Soleil. But back to your question, when the pandemic hit, I started getting into what's called a sync licensing, which is getting music into TV and films, sort of like jingles, but it's creating music for scenes in TV shows and things like that, where there are companies that'll send you what's called briefs, and you'll say, "Hey, we need music for this scene where the character's getting in the car or whatever, and they need this type of song playing on the radio." Along the way, I would post music online, and that's where I got opportunities to work on. There's an independent film called Hemisphere that is the film that got streamed, got landed on Tubi, Google Play, and Amazon Prime Video. Director. I'm working on his second film right now, doing a score for that. And then along the way, even before the pandemic, I was doing music for museum exhibits. That's where National Geographic
Smithsonian comes in. Yeah.
So being in the DC area, I had about a 7-year span of doing museum music for museums that exhibits that are traveling the world. But
so you weren't doing elevator music; you were doing museum music.
Museum music. It's hard because with things like that, so with music on a TV show or movie, there's evidence. You know, you can load the clip up, I can record the clip. With museums, and also did music for Disney theme parks, there is no evidence other than what I do is I go to the thing once it's out into the world, and on my phone I'm recording this experience. Like, hey, this is my music playing. I have music at Disney theme parks, and we were in LA at Disneyland, and my wife was like, "Hey, I got tickets to the park," because yeah, I couldn't get tickets as part of the deal, but I did get paid. So we went to the park, and we're going into where my music's playing, the area where my music's playing for this attraction. And my wife's telling everyone, she's like, "That's my husband's music playing." And I'm recording on my phone because I'm like, this is the evidence that, because otherwise I won't have, I do have like the video, but I can't post it. But I won't have the evidence of this is my music, as opposed to TV and film and video games where you can get a clip of it and post that online. So getting all of that, and yeah, there's more to the story and the journey, but I'll stop there. But that's how some of those projects came about to be over the last few years.
That's interesting. My now ex-wife and I did the land sea Disney thing as our honeymoon, because growing up, she never had a chance to go to Disney. So we did the whole princess theme wedding and all that stuff. You know, I even had the cake special made into a castle with a moat and a drawbridge around it and all that stuff. So that was in '99, though. That was long before you wrote anything for them. So we didn't hear your stuff there.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's then go to the more traditional music then, I guess. We've talked about the church and the gospel, but you also have recorded gospel music and whatnot also, right?
So actually, what's interesting is going into the sync space, occasionally I get briefs where they want new versions of gospel hymns. So just recently, there was a song that was part of a brief. I don't remember the song, what it was, but they wanted a cover of the song. So I reached out to one of the artists who I know would nail the cover. It's almost like a quintet quartet style vocal. So I was able to tap into those gospel roots. I was like, yo, I can make a version of this. I like did the piano organ bass thing with, virtual instruments and send it to him. And like, he killed it. And hopefully we land that opportunity. I want to say it might've been for a scene in a TV show, but it's interesting how those elements from the past, from the church, can be brought into this other side of things. And then I'll share another angle to it that, again, might be hit or miss with your audience, but I do have music with artists that do, use profanity, or they may talk about things that are not religious. So I was working with one artist, and I was sending him instrumentals, like beats from my catalog. And he told me, he said, your music makes me want to use less profanity. And I was like, I don't know, I'm just making music. And he's like, I'm just like, I don't know what that means. But, when I started thinking about it, I was like, okay, I guess you can take, the musician out the church, but you can't take the church out the musician, and somehow those elements come across. So yeah, there might be times where I'll have music on like a horror film that might seem, against the religious values, but I do know, who I am and whose I am and where I, my upbringing. So it's me getting my music out into the world and sharing that.
We are in the world. We have to deal with the reality of the world. And there's no sense in passing up opportunities to deal in, when I think horror films, I think these days Blumhouse.
Of course, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. One of the best, yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, though, too, those inroads can rub off. Your influence can get in there too. Because I think I mentioned Blumhouse with dual intent, because one of my favorite Christian movies of all time is The Resurrection of Gavin Stone, which of course you use the word resurrection with a Christian crowd, and they go, oh my God, you can't say that about a human. It's a figurative spiritual resurrection, not a literal one. People, can we calm down, please? But it was interesting that Blumhouse approached the Christian studio about, we want to be involved in this project and distribute that for you.
Yeah. I think you just never know where some of these things will combine in your journey. So it does help to have those experiences and to be able to draw from those experiences. And it's like, it might be something that you experience, 5 years ago, and all of a sudden it comes around full circle. It's like, oh, this is related to that thing I did 5 years ago. And now it's like, oh, that's why that happened then. So I could have what I need to do this now, if that makes sense.
Right. The whole concept. If you're doing jingles, you're just a money grubber, sellout. You'll sell your soul to anybody for a few bucks. No. Like you said, those things can lead to other bigger, important things that have more value and meaning. That had you passed up on those things, this thing wouldn't be presented and available.
So yeah, there's ways to tie in elements and being, a Christian in the music space in general, because we hear stories of all the corruption in music. But I know a lot of music creators who, obviously, you hear stories of who grew up in the church and they have that background, and not everyone loses that. So
yeah, like being from the Detroit area,
of course,
Madonna. Immediately comes to mind. And her early music was still fairly Catholic. It was her upbringing, but Christian influenced, right? Papa Don't Preach. I'm Keeping My Baby. I doubt she does that song in her sets anymore, even though it was a major hit, but because that's all gone. And like Katy Perry started off in gospel and immediately became a let's dress skimpily and sing about sex to sell records. Unfortunately, are those sellouts. But then there are examples like Elvis, who people may talk about the gyration and whatnot, and oh my God, that's not very Christianly, but he never really lost his gospel and positive roots through his journey.
Yeah, because there are artists who, you're in Detroit, so Eminem, one of the biggest artists from Detroit, who I would have never thought would have done a gospel record. And he did a gospel record, no cussing at all. And it was on one of the Kanye gospel albums. And it was pretty good. Snoop Dogg did a gospel record where he brought in a lot of the major contemporary gospel artists and he released a religious album and it was really good. So there's a lot of this. And I don't think, obviously, if a pop artist puts out a gospel record, it's not a money thing. They're not going to make a lot of money on a gospel record. But I think there are some convictions with these artists who maybe grew up in the church or they have a realization and they.
Well, I would question and be suspicious of Eminem's motives.
I think you would like it. I got to find the song and send it to you.
But his attempt to collaborate, I think that opportunity presented, so he took it. I'm a fan of a lot of his music. I'm not a fan of him personally. I'm more a Kid Rock Detroit kind of, or a Ted Nugent Detroit kind of guy, or an Alice Cooper, Vincent kind of guy. I really like how Vincent, aka of Alice Cooper, has come around now to his roots again and said, yeah, he went through that sex, drugs, rock and roll, alcoholism period. But you look at the Alice Cooper catalog, it's always been Christian underlying tone. His shows, always good versus evil, and the evil gets beheaded in the end. He's returned to the faith now, but recognizes without Jesus, none of that would have been possible. And obviously, it was working through him even when he didn't realize it was.
Yep. And I mean, the legacy of just Detroit music in general, even there's a lot of great gospel artists from that area, but even when you look at Motown, like a lot of that was
was gospel,
but it was gospel influenced.
Yes. And I think of like Bob Seger. I frankly don't think he's all that. He's got some talent, yes, and he's got some good songs, but just not a fan. Just like I'm not a fan of Bruce Springsteen either. I never was a Bob Dylan. Yes, there's some talent there, and yes, they've got some good stuff, but I just never quite got the, like Lady Gaga too, not to make it sexist. I was talking about males, so I call her Lady Gag Me.
Oh no.
Poker Face, absolutely brilliant song. Brilliant. You take a phrase that's been in the nomenclature for ages and turn it into that. Sheer brilliance. But not really a fan of hers, but I can separate the personality, the person, from the artistry.
That's the thing that I think some people do struggle with, is separating the music of the person from the artistry. And sometimes it is hard if the person does something, that's just hard to overlook, and you have to basically shut all of their stuff down. But again, the legacy of artists who have sort of not towed the line, but they have spiritual elements and they bring it over to the pop side. A lot of these artists we see on these reality shows, or we used to see on these reality shows, you could tell they grew up in the church. Or a lot of artists I reach out to for projects, it's like, oh, I need something that might be R&B, but I need an artist that I know has that sort of those religious undertones in their delivery, in their writing, to really bring it to that level that it needs to be brought to, pitch, or this opportunity.
I wrote a piece on Substack the other day about cancel culture and whatnot. And unfortunately, the pathetical corruptness that I call PC prevents discussions from being had that we should. I watched a video the other day from Professor of Rock on YouTube, and he was talking about taboo songs, right? Like Cher. I can't say the name of the tune or this video will not be allowed to appear on YouTube, but she sung about her Cherokee and Caucasian mixed blend, let's say that, upbringing. And it was a very positive MLK Jr. content of character, not my cover, positive tune, but she refuses to perform it today because it's become taboo because of the title and people leaping to conclusions rather than what the song is really about. And another one is Gary Puckett in the Union Gap, the song Young Girl, about young girl, get out of my mind. My love for you is way out of line. You better run, girl. You're much too young, girl. Because she lied about her age and started a relationship with somebody older. And technically, there indeed is that the statutory rape issues of laws and younger and older people. Unlike that was talking about the positivity of protecting children and letting kids be kids and they grow up soon enough. We don't need to rush them, but people hear the young girl thing and their mind immediately goes to the bad places. Unlike, I mentioned Ted Nugent before, Little Miss Dangerous, such a dangerous body with a little girl's face. Well, I don't want to read his mind here and say what he may have been indeed saying, that it's about that, but he didn't engage in it. But there was that potential, right? That risk and dealing in that subject. But sex with a minor is certainly implied there. And therefore, these songs very taboo. But again, just canceling them means you don't have the discussion about the important topics.
It's that difficult, do you separate the art from the artist? And sometimes it's hard, to do that. Sometimes you do have to separate, you do have to cancel everything related. So, and I know each person has their own, and each platform has their own rules against regarding that, depending on a number of factors. But definitely something to consider.
My Sharona for the Knack was a massive hit, and it still gets airplay today. And it literally, My Sharona, a 20-year-old writing a song about his 16-year-old girlfriend. So, I mean, there's no implication or innuendo there. It is right there in your face, doesn't deny that's what it is. But that's accepted, whereas other tunes get a bad connotation, a bad rep. I doubt, I'm going to ask anyway, but is there anything in your repertoire or catalog where you've run into someone coming at you? How dare you? Like you said, you've written some beats and they're on some foul. Have you had somebody come at you like, how dare you do it? And they don't really understand the overall bigger picture and who you really are.
When you say people don't understand who I am right now, or the journey or the music, from what perspective?
Kind of all of it, right? They only see the limited thing that they've seen. They don't know any background, and they leap to negative conclusions automatically.
So that's sorry, that's a unique, and it's a hard thing when people, because we are people, sometimes we make assumptions based on our experiences and our past about other people and other things. So when people do that to me, I try to help them understand, why or who I am, or share a post or a video or a link or something, or just send a quick, message to them like, hey, here's who I am. So it just depends on, you know, what exactly how they approach that, or if they even verbalize or communicate their assumptions or what they believe is happening, whether it's in a public post or a private message. I haven't experienced that a lot, but when it does happen, it's just addressing it and trying to get to, you know, what is the reasoning behind this assumption, or how can I help you get a better picture of exactly who I am or where that assumption might be off. So yeah,
and we are all human. We're all frail, flawed, can make mistakes, can jump to conclusions at times when we know deep inside we shouldn't, but we do, because again, we're imperfect, right?
Yeah.
And we're all entitled to bad days on occasion, and forget the whole Martin Luther King Jr. content of character. Look below the surface, not just what you see up here. There's a whole lot more can be going on down below there, that the context matters.
Yeah. Context. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into play. It might just be a schedule thing or a time, you know, thing, or what's happening. For example, I went to a conference earlier this year, and it's a big music conference in LA. I do a panel there. I've done a panel there every year for the last 3 years, at least one panel. I did a couple panels there. But towards the end of the conference, we found out that our grandfather passed away, and I just musically, I didn't make music literally for almost 2 weeks because of that, and because I got sick at the conference. So when I came home, I was just trying to get over this sickness, and I was going to sleep at like 7 p.m., 8 p.m. Every night, which I never do. I'm usually up till 1 or 2 a.m. making music. So I was just my things were just off for a while. So musically, I didn't do anything. So if I got messages that week that might have been urgent, or you know, that might have been important to someone else, it's like health is important, you know, family is important. There are things that other things will have to wait for, and I might have missed a couple deadlines or something, and I explained that after, but not during. So some people just don't have the patience, and I get it, because there's some things that, you know, things have to be done.
They've got deadlines
they
of
have
their
commitments.
own.
Yeah. So communicating, you know, saying loss in the family, then people understand that. But yeah, so communication, that's really where it all boils down to, what it all boils down to.
Yeah, amen. Right, exact. I have a show with Roger and Puck. They do a show together called Zoomers to Boomers, and the whole point of that show is indeed, we got to stop making assumptions. Like, don't assume. Do this crazy thing called asking, right? Communication, actually talking things through, rather than being angry at somebody for some perceived slight that isn't really there.
Yeah, you're right. Like, if don't assume, just ask. And even myself, I've done some of that, where it's like, I might assume someone did something for something, but then you start asking, it's like, oh, they thought this thing. And so yeah, communication definitely is where it all boils down to.
Okay, well, I try to target my shows to be around 30 minutes, so they're not too long. People can potentially listen over lunch hour while they're at the diner or whatever, and eating their food on their lunch hour. So let's start to wrap things up. And I have your website, but for the sake of those listening on the 20 plus audio platforms, please inform us where people can reach out. What is your website?
Dafingaz.com, DAFINGAZ.com. As a music producer and composer, I work with a team that does custom music. Some might have used to call them jingles, but custom music for brands and corporations. I also do sync licensing, movie trailers, composing for films and projects and corporate videos and corporations and things like that. So almost anything music related, audio editing. Feel free to reach out.
And like I said, my audience knows I can never pass on the wordplay and the lame puns. But at the same time, name association works, and
Yep.
associating a joke with something can help people's memory. So it's
Yeah.
it's Defingas as opposed to Big Bang Theory and Bazinga.
Bazinga, the fingers. I like that. Yeah,
Right.
my wife became a huge fan of Big Bang Theory. We went to France a while ago, but we were there, and the only English show that was on TV was Big Bang Theory. And because our timeline was off, we'd be up like 1 or 2 a.m. watching Big Bang Theory because that was the only English language show, and that got hooked on it. So Bazinga, yeah.
Well, thank you, my new friend Marcus, for coming on. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us.
You're welcome. Yeah, thank you for having me, Joseph. Very biblical name for podcast.
Yeah. Well, you're right. Part for Saint Joseph. And in fact, my grandparents on my mother's side helped build the St. Joseph's Church here in Wyandotte.
Wow.
But my grandmother on my mother's side was Josephine. So there were, many reasons to put that name on me.
Yeah.
And I'm happy. Legacy. I'm glad. I'm glad. So,
definitely
all right.
Legacy.
Thank you again. Take care and God bless.
Thank you too. Appreciate the opportunity. God bless.
Thank you for having tuned in for Constitutionalist Politics Show. If you haven't already, please check out my primary internationally available book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you. Available anywhere books are sold. If you have locally run bookstores still near you, they can order it for you. And let me remind, over time, the fancy high production items will come. But for now, for starters, it's just you as a very appreciated listener by me. All substance, no fluff, just straight to key discussion points. A show that looks at a variety of topics, mostly politics, through a Christian U.S. constitutionalist lens. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Take care. God bless. Like and subscribe to Constitutionalist Politics Podcast and share episodes. We need your help.